Hi, everybody, and good day. Thanks for joining us. We are very excited to have you here today for our conversation on operational excellence in EV charging. And this one is really focused on lessons from the field. And we've got some great panelists today. A couple quick housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared after the session. So feel free to focus on the discussion rather than taking notes. We will be saving time for questions at the end, and you can submit them anytime using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom panel. This session will be about 30 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A immediately following. So feel free to put those questions in throughout. And with that, I will hand over to Matt to introduce himself and get us started.
Thank you, Jen, and welcome everyone. As Jen mentioned, we'll talk operations today, operations of EV charging infrastructure and what's hard about it. So we brought you two great experts in the industry, and we'll chat and ask different questions to understand better, like what's the reality of doing this. Let's start with intro. So about me, I'm working at Clockwork, VP of Solutions. So I have about a decade of experience in the industry. I've touched about a bit of everything, DC and level 2 deployment, operations, demand response, and so on. And now leading the product development at Clockwork. Now I'll pass it to Aidan and then Alex.
Hi, I'm Aidan Sheridan. I've been in the EV industry for about 4.5 years now. Most recently as an operations leader, where we scaled a network from 0 to around 2,000, 2,200-ish ports, nationwide, specifically local to Canada, but from coast to coast, and specifically or primarily in the multi-unit residential space.
Thanks, Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex Canning Choi. Similarly to Aidan, I've been in the EV charging space for about 4 years now. Started in the deployment side, initially on level 2 chargers, residential and public. And then when I made the move to Hydro, focus on level 3 fast charging sites. I'm now in a role as a EV operations program manager with BC Hydro, so looking over the operations of our network, making sure the chargers are online and reliable for our customers. Just to share a little bit about the BC Hydro network for the people who are not familiar. So BC Hydro, we're kind of the utility here in the province of British Columbia. So our charging network spans only in the province of BC. We have currently, just as of today, 900 ports across 190 sites in the province. So this is from sites in the cities and the urban areas, and then we have sites all the way up to the Yukon border and very rural areas. We operate all different kinds of chargers, from L2s to some legacy 50 kilowatts to kind of very modern kind of 400 kilowatt fast chargers. So yeah, excited to kind of share a little bit about the network and kind of the challenges that come with operating such a complex network.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. I think what I didn't realize before I moved to British Columbia, it's whole specialties in a way that you have like the big cities in the metropolitan area where it's very dense, but then you also need to travel very long distance where you have just one road and there's some criticality there where you deploy infrastructure and it needs to work, otherwise you really there's no plan B basically. So maybe let's start with the challenges of operating a charging network. Like maybe like Alex, do you want to start? Like what are the top of your mind like challenges in operating across the whole province?
Yeah, I think kind of one of the key challenges that we're really focused on and constantly kind of working towards is charger reliability. More than just focus on uptime and it being online, but ensuring that the charger is reliable and will actually consistently deliver successful charging stations or charging sessions for our customers. Exactly like you're saying, Matt. We have some chargers that are very critical in terms of kind of the location. It could be hundreds of, 150, 200 kilometers to the next station, and if the charger doesn't work, they could be in a very dire situation. So we kind of treat all of our chargers like that, where we have a lot of focus and making sure we can successfully kind of deliver for our customers. So yeah, ensuring that those chargers are kind of reliable and will work is probably our biggest challenge that we're constantly working towards.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess Aidan, on your end, you kind of on the other side of the service, right, where it's more like level 2 charging. You mentioned MURBs, so like multi-unit residential building and so on. Like, do you see the reliability as well or other challenges?
Yeah, I think reliability is just as critical. I mean, sometimes you have the benefit of being in an apartment building with shared parking. You have like a sort of cluster of chargers that residents can pick and choose from. So if one of them's down, it's not the end of the world. But a lot of times you're in condo spaces where the chargers are dedicated, right? So someone gets home from a long day at work, they try and plug in their car, it doesn't work. Now they're stressing, figuring out how are they going to get to work the next morning, right? How are they going to drop their kids off to school? Like, there's not necessarily like I wouldn't even want to consider some of the problems that come from having a charger on a sole highway in the middle of a mountain, but it's there's still like that same critical nature of like people need to drive, they need to move, and you don't want to be put in a position where you're trying to figure out how I'm gonna get where I need to be.
Yeah, I guess it goes with adoption as well, right? As people transition, like they don't want to be stressed, or is it going to work this time, or like do I need to figure out a plan B and change their plan just to have an operational vehicle?
Yeah.
So maybe talking about like when you have an issue, like it takes time, I guess, to solve the issues. Like there's a speed of resolution on your end, and then like how does it goes usually? Like you have an issue, and what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, so number one, there's like some initial triage going on in the background, trying to just from figure out what you can determine from the sort of remote puzzle pieces you have access to, like the connectivity, whatever logs or history the charger might have, like anything you can find to sort of piece together what went wrong. Sometimes it just points to user error, which is always fun to try and diagnose. But while you're doing that, I think the number one thing you have to do is communicate with the drivers, let them know, because again, they're put in a stressful situation. They don't know when their charger is going to be working. They don't know how long they're going to have to Uber to and from work, or like take transit, find other accommodations, right? So kind of maintaining those communication channels while we're figuring out exactly what might be going wrong. And it could be in the MURB space, where a lot of the time you're in underground parking. There's the situation of trying to figure out, like, you're bringing in cellular boosters or Wi-Fi networks or something underground for the chargers to rely on, and at that point, you're like, there's so many moving parts, there's so many points of failure really that it could be. So yes, it could be a situation where there's an issue, the driver's just not authenticating their app properly, or something like that. But it could also be something related to the electrical. The charger itself could be faulting out. The signal might not be reliable, and just trying to piece all that together. It takes time. Absolutely, trying to figure out what the actual issue is.
Yeah, time and various expertise, I guess, because electrical, you mentioned a lot of communications and so on. So
No,
quite
absolutely.
interesting. And on your end, Alex, like is it kind of the same as well, even though chargers are more powerful?
Yeah, I think it's very, very similar. Kind of very resonate when you're speaking about that, Aiden. Kind of, I would say, yeah, like it's a lot of time is kind of that detective work of figuring out where the issue is. And you said there's a lot of failure points. I think for level 3 public charging, similarly, less with connectivity, but we have more infrastructure when it comes to kind of power distribution. So the transformer, and then we have our various kiosks. So those are failure points for us as well. And then yeah, with the fast power charging, sometimes with it being a little bit more complex technology, there's various other components that can fail within the charger that we have to be aware of. So yeah, a lot of times it's there's a lot of information to sort through and a lot of kind of work to kind of identify what's going on.
Mhm. Um, Aidan, I think you mentioned like communication issue and underground like parking and so on. Like, do you have any like a problem child side that stand out and that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think there's a site that really taught me a lesson really like early on in my tenure, and that was a site where we didn't have any kind of pre-set up communication channels between my team and the team that was managing the on-site networking, like the Wi-Fi network that the churches were relying on. So it was very early on. We were kind of still exploring how like our best practices, and this is I think the first instance where we didn't actually put in the Wi-Fi network ourselves, and the chargers were just behaving abnormally. And I mean, we have at this point maybe like 20, 30 different sites, and this is the only one where things are going wrong. All the chargers are provisioned identically. It's underground parking, and suddenly we have no visibility of the Wi-Fi, and something's going wrong. So of course we're trying to reach out to this other company and say, hey, there's something going on with your network. Our chargers don't like it. We don't know what it is. It's just a huge unknown, like black spot on this like sort of like in our detective notes, and so we're effectively pointing a finger at the Wi-Fi, saying like, yeah, our chargers are fine, they're provisioned fine, but then this other company, obviously nobody likes to carry the blame for something going wrong. So it was very much kind of a learning experience of having to communicate that it doesn't really matter who's taking ownership of this. We're just trying to get it solved. I don't care if it's like ultimately I don't care if it's my chargers or the network or whatever the issue is. We just need to identify what the issue is, and on the fly we were establishing those communication channels, what is and isn't okay for our company to share with each other. And all the while a driver can't charge their car. It was taking like days and weeks, and like it was brutal. Ultimately, I think for that site, we decided to like I provisioned it as like sort of a plug and play charger, and we comped the building back. But there was but even still, that's like lost revenue. That's still a measure of frustration. But basically, the lesson I learned there for sure is we need to get a handle on all the information that could potentially result in faster resolution before anything does go wrong. And also another issue there is something that any operator will learn is it doesn't matter who's really at fault. The brand that's on the charger is going to see the blame from the drivers.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, because I remember there are like different models where the name you see is like operating the charger, but it's not necessarily the owner of the charger, and then you're not necessarily happy when it doesn't work. But anyway, I digress. That's an interesting story, because it kind of tells me that you need data to, like, you're behind your computer, and you need the data to figure out like what's going on. But then you need as much data as you can, I guess. But then what do you do, right, with all the data? Like, how do you leverage it, basically?
Absolutely. I think it really is one of those things where you have to understand the full stack, the full tech stack that you're deploying completely. It's one of those things that you have to be familiar with everything that you're selling before it gets installed, before it gets energized. Because it's only one part of it to have all that data, like fill those sort of black spots on your detective notes, as I said. But once you have that sort of stack of information, what do you do with it? Like, how do you parse through it if you don't know what you're looking at? So really building a team or maintaining the resources to process that information and really use it for the triages is the other sort of half of the equation.
I guess there's the detections, and then like knowing there's an issue first, and then troubleshooting what's the cause of the issue, and then figuring it out. And on your end, Alex, like how do you like leverage data?
Yeah, I think I mean, data is extremely critical to everything we do in operations. One thing kind of what you kind of pointed on is, I think Dana may have said it, but we're very reliant on it because everything that we do is unfortunately remote, you know. We can't be in everywhere at once. You know, we have, I think you had hundreds, even thousands of sites. Same here, hundreds of sites. Um, Without the data, if we don't have that information, we're very limited on what we can do operationally. And sending someone out to site to get boots on the ground can be very expensive. So yeah, having that data of the charger and other components feedback to us, that we can kind of review that, and basically that when we can then determine kind of how to resolve the issue, we're prepared, and we can kind of minimize the cost of repeat visits, or yeah, not bringing the right part or something like that. So yeah, the way we leverage data is really in kind of how we um, make decisions operationally, when to dispatch, who to kind of contact, and everything comes through that data of kind of the charger, logs of what's happening, and kind of error codes and whatnot.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess as you said, like you learn constantly. Like there's always kind of new things and that are coming up, and but your goal is try to not have the same issue twice, because otherwise, or at least like be more efficient the next time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, efficiency is kind of huge. Yeah. We do expect, and that's the thing, we spot patterns. Either we can, and one of the things is with data is being proactive, being able to spot the trends before they happen. Basically, ideally, if we can get out to a charger and repair it before impacted customers or multiple customers, um, yeah, that would be ideal, you know. So
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, have you seen, like, both of you, as the network scale, some kind of change where, things got too big, or there's way too much data, and then we kind of need to change the way we operate, or is it been like going progressively? Is there some kind of milestones maybe you've identified?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. I can't think of the exact charger count or location count that where it was just where they kind of tripped over like a milestone or anything, as you're saying. But it just there was definitely a point where we were trying to be proactive, trying to maintain reliability, and doing everything very manually. So it amounted to like myself and like other team members monitoring the network multiple times a day, spending like uh, tens of man hours, like a week, like adding up and trying to review to make sure that we're staying on top of things. We're investigating things, as Alex said, and resolving them before they impact any drivers. Um, and it's one thing to do that, like you're putting out fires and stuff, but it doesn't give you the time to try to find permanent fixes to prevent those fires from popping up again, or to resolve them and investigate and figure out if there is a way to remotely resolve them before a truck roll. You don't really have the time for process improvement when you're just stuck trying to process all the data and get ahead of everything, right? Um, so I think it gets to the point where you have to figure out, like, are we going to scale headcount, or are we just going to do this smarter, right? And that's, I mean, I just have to plug Clockwork here, because absolutely a wonderful tool allowed us to effectively trim down from, as I mentioned, tens of hours spent per week working on this stuff, to just having that whole initial information processing and gathering sort of uh, process just seamlessly integrated and automated. Um, so it just cut it down to maybe like half hour a day while I'm having my coffee and check my emails. I'm also just checking everything that Clockwork has done or has sort of gathered for us, and it's a necessity for scaling is having some sort of tooling and enhanced capabilities for processing that data.
Yeah, because otherwise, I guess, as you add more chargers, where the amount of data keeps piling up, and you still need a lot of manual time to troubleshoot, go through the logs and so on. So your cost is just scaling as the growing at the same time as your network is growing. So you kind of want to have this under control and hopefully like flattens it. Alex, on your end, like, have you seen some big changes at some point? Like,
yeah, I think when I joined kind of the operations team, we were already in the kind of 500 plus point. Again, I would say with Aiden, it's a hard number to put your finger on exactly the point, but yeah, as you scale for sure, and you get into those, probably hundreds to thousands, like that's where it gets really challenging to stay on top of everything. And kind of like what you're mentioning, Matt, where like staying kind of like the same, I would say even sometimes like it might even kind of get exponentially harder because, what Aiden's saying with the detective notes, if you got, all these ongoing fires you're trying to put out, and, it's one thing if you got one, you can just focus on, but if you have 20, 30 charters down that you're all trying to manage at the same time, coordinating, 30 different issues and chargers and stakeholders and stuff, like it can really get like out of hand, and it's quite the challenge. So really making sure you kind of have the systems in place, the tools in place beforehand is key.
Yeah, and like maybe going into the specifics of the issues, like are there any recurring issues that in your experience it's a common reasons that like keep reoccurring, and then you try to fix it, but it's like a tricky one? I think maybe Aiden, you were talking about communication issue as well. I guess communication in parking lot must be quite complex, no?
Yeah, I think that's the most commonly recurring is communication or that's the only one I can say is consistent throughout the charger. Every charger needs to be able to ping back to the software backend that whatever you've loaded up, right? And it doesn't matter what software you're using, if the sort of messaging system that you're putting up, like the Wi-Fi or Ethernet or whatever it is, if there's any flaws in that, that will cause issues. And networking is a particularly fun one to try and diagnose, because it could be something as simple as like someone tugged on an Ethernet cable or something and something came loose, or it could be a building went up beside the one that you've got your chargers installed, and suddenly the signal quality to your antenna is just significantly worse, like just the landscape changing around you. So trying to figure that out is definitely challenging, and it is one of those things where you need to have information on every single node in that tech stack to properly diagnose. The only other one I can think of that is similarly recurring but not as prevalent would be firmware updates that manufacturers haven't quite tested adequately is a fun one to diagnose as well. Any kind of slight changes to configuration or anything like that. So staying on top of that and making sure you're handling the like how that software and updates are rolled out, that's also helpful.
Yeah. And yeah, and I guess from your experience also, like you had control over those communication gears, right? Contrary to maybe other type of networks. So you were not managing only the EV chargers; you were managing like thousands of different IoT devices.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse there. Like it's great to have that full ownership, but also, there's literally no one else to point a finger at, which I mean, I loved, because, it meant we could very quickly resolve everything, or at least get to the bottom of everything. But the pressure's on, right? Like there's so much information, there's so much you have to take ownership of and manage. So it's it's challenging. Like, it's a lot more complex than people first realize when they're putting in a charger, especially on the level 2 side. It's got the same wiring as your electric stove. Like, it's not a complicated device for surface level, but once you start really building all the supportive hardware and the network around it, then you start realizing how much you really have to sort of take ownership of.
Yeah, and I'm not a telecommunication expert, but I've seen like the signal strength. It's a weird value that fluctuates without it's hard to understand why it changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I've kind of one. There's always certain problems that are kind of hard to solve, and there's items that are require more deeper investigation, and it's harder to kind of point a finger at. But kind of one example I want to speak towards is um, that we have to deal with a lot in the public fast charging side is power modules. So we understand that power modules is a kind of common failure component. It's a tricky one because it doesn't always take the charger down itself. So the charger will still be operational, just at a lower output power, and that can cause some frustration for customers, and overall impacts the network because you have to have probably longer sessions, fewer sessions, so you're making less revenue. So being able to figure out how to figure out, because we understand it's going to be something, we'll never solve it, to kind of try to identify which ones are failing before they create too much issue. So being able to kind of use the data to understand the behaviors of where it may fail is kind of critical, and it's a small fix, but something, again, as you scale and as you grow, where you can just be a bit more efficient in how you operate the network.
Yeah, and I guess this is not an issue that like the EV driver will call you and says, "Hey, you have a power module that fails," because there's so many parameters in how your vehicle fast charge. Like maybe they believe, "Oh, it's my battery or something," but that's actually not.
Exactly. It's a tough one to nail down, and it's one that requires kind of the right data and understanding and combination of which vehicles are using trends over time. Um, yeah, so kind of it's something that as we kind of get more sophisticated, something we're putting more focus on for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Well, maybe going back in the past, like if we're like 5 years in the past, like what advice would you give yourself? Maybe like Alex, if you want to jump in, like young you from 5 years ago, like what would you say? Pay attention to these, or
Yeah, I think, I mean, in the probably have a lot of advice to my former younger self, but kind of more in the context of kind of the
yeah.
operations and how to set things up. I would say, like, the systems, I would say, like, kind of getting the processes right early on. You don't want to have to be kind of changing it as you go, and especially kind of as you maybe as you get to kind of a more developed network and hundreds of chargers. If you do have to kind of migrate and change processes, it can be quite a challenge. So making sure those things are set up from the beginning. And one of the things kind of on my mind is like kind of the data, the tools, kind of the software stack of how you're gonna kind of manage and operate. Um, like Gaten was saying before, the customer communication channels, like setting up, how you're gonna respond to issues and calls. And it's sometimes, it's especially kind of harping on it before. It's for us, there's times that it's very critical. So we need, almost 24/7 support, and how we kind of triage that. And then having the right hardware and technology partners for the kind of charging technology, and kind of having the right systems in place to escalate and discuss issues. And then on site support staff, kind of technicians, and both technicians and then also the right spare parts. So all these kind of systems kind of play together. So then once you do, we kind of talk a lot about issue detection, but then the next step is, can you repair it quick enough? So having the right parts available and the right people um, around, especially for us province wide, that we can, within hours fix any charger if we need to. So yeah, I would make sure kind of that kind of backbone infrastructure systems are in place before it kind of scale too big. Because yeah, trying to adjust any of those one things as you already have chargers is quite hard.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember in my past life, like deploying 50 kilowatts DC fast charger. We were trying as many brands as we could because we want to learn. But I guess when you arrive to the hundreds of chargers, as you mentioned, like the spare parts and so on, like you need to have a good control on that and availability and being able to deploy them and repair chargers. So you may want to narrow down the number of hardware
Mhm.
and the diversity of system you operate. Yeah. Aiden, what would be your advice for you 5 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, uh, I think the best thing I would have to say. I mean, I have to agree with everything Alex said for sure. That just sort of build your systems to scale and sort of try to um, try to assume, like, try to figure out what issues might arise before they do. That's like, and kind of plan for those. But I think just boiling that down even further is just checking every assumption that I had going into this, right? And that's something that I kind of touched on earlier, where you look at the equipment, you look at everything, like, you've got a Wi-Fi network at home, it works fine, hopefully. You've got this pretty basic piece of equipment. Like, when you open a charger up, it is really simple on the inside for the most part, or at least on surface level it looks like it. So you just kind of assume that everything's going to communicate well, it's all going to work. You don't know how much can really go wrong, but also how to look for all those issues and everything too. Like that, by not assuming that everything's going to work, it kind of prompts you to gather the information, so you can validate whatever assumptions you might have, or invalidate them. And so just gather as much information as possible. Dive into, like, just check the claims of the manufacturers and a lot of the partners you're working with, sort of vet those a little better. Because there's a lot of equipment out there that claims to be like a one size fits all solution, but there really is hardware that works better for each individual scenario. Like, something that might be amazing for another like similar operator to what you have might be awful for your use case, right? So just kind of understanding what you need, um, making no assumptions about how it's all going to work once it's actually in the field. Uh, pre-screen, pre-test, all of that. Um, that's the best advice I think I could give myself 5 years ago. It would have saved me a lot of trouble. But and I guess the number one assumption that I think a lot of operators still make to this day is do not assume that uptime is the same as reliability. Don't assume that just because a charger is showing is online means it's going to work when someone pulls up to charge. Because those I think were, even though it's a very small case of issues where that's sort of the occurring factor, where a user, or like the charger is reporting is all clear. There's so many other flags that you can look at to determine whether or not a charger will work when it's supposed to.
This is great. Thank you. Yeah. Before passing this back to Jen, if I try to summarize, I think, yeah, we didn't mention it often, but it all ties to what you said, and the reliability and the charge success. At the end of the day, we're building a critical infrastructure that everybody will need to rely on at some point as we electrify transportation. And it's not only about this green light that all the charger communicates. It's really trying to find every single issues and make sure that customers, and by customer I mean EV drivers, don't even need to think about, oh, is it going to work, or can I make this trip to to Alaska or see my family somewhere north of BC, they don't need to worry about it. They know they can trust that it will work. So yeah, with this, I'll pass it back to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thanks, Alex and Aiden. Great conversation, and thank you for sharing the experiences that you've had. A lot of great advice in there as well. Really interesting for those of us that are completely focused on building and supporting these networks. So thank you for that. I will take it from here and start working through the questions that have come in. And as a reminder, at the bottom of your screen, to all of our great attendees, please feel free to submit questions that you've got, and we'll go through them with the panel. If you have a specific person that you want to ask that question, feel free to flag that as well. And while those are coming in, I want to just quickly highlight a couple of next steps. So we will be sending out the recording of this session to the attendees. If you're interested in learning more about Clockwork or have any additional questions around topics that we've covered that you think of after this Q&A, feel free to reply to that email that you'll get from myself with any questions or follow-up. Happy to get back to you either through email or even to schedule a follow-up session. So with that, let's dive into your questions. One moment. Okay, and I will open this up to Matt, Aiden, and Alex. Matt also has a ton of experience on both sides, both from Clockwork as well as an operator. First question, what are the most informative early signals that save the most resources? What are the most frequent interventions you have to take other than dispatching a technician?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's hard to give like a blanket. I don't think there's one specific one that I can think of, like one specific signal, but very much. I mean, ironically enough, signal strength is a great one. What are the most frequent? Sort of outdated software, like outdated firmware. The signal strength is key. Sometimes a charger will tell you something's wrong just by not delivering enough power. Like the charger might initiate a session, have an okay handshake with the vehicle, everything like that. But if you're looking and for whatever reason, average session power is significantly lower than what the charger could theoretically output, that could signal something wrong with the power management profile or maybe a cooling system or something like that. In the case of level 3s. But as far as interventions to take other than dispatching a technician, definitely validating the issue. So in the case of a customer call, like let's say a client, as someone calls to say, hey, this charger's not working. If there's anyone at all on site, and I was lucky enough, like I said, to work in the MERB space primarily. There's a lot of very willing on-site property staff, not necessarily technical trained, but like just, hey, can you go and just tell me what the charger is showing you, like on its faceplate? Like, is it reading an error code or something like that? Like, is everything powered on still? That could signal, if there's no green lights on, could signal a power failure or something. Like there could be something else wrong. And a lot of times you still have to dispatch a tech, but you're dispatching the right tech and they're armed with the right information or the right issues. Sometimes you're lucky enough, there's somebody on site, like it could be a flip breaker and there's someone capable of dealing with that. But then even still, you want to investigate what the root cause of that was. It's very much case by case, but those are the main things that I would look to.
Yeah, just to add in there, one simple one, I think, yeah, to echo what Ian said, but one simple one that kind of comes to mind is, it's kind of silly, but it's like, have you tried turning it off again and on again?
Oh yeah.
So I think one simple thing that we do is, we'll push resets to the charger remotely. Sometimes it'll be working weird, and then you give it a reset, and then it jumps back to normal. So yeah, and it depends on the various different charger type, but there's certain kind of like remote actions you can do. There's certain actions where you can kind of like have it prompt and like kind of like self-diagnose and check its components and like kind of maybe it's lost connection to a board and it goes through a check and it will reestablish connection. So there's various kind of couple actions we can do with that kind of checking, again, was saying kind of the issue and making sure has anyone changed any software, was the firmware kind of push that you weren't expecting. These are all things that you kind of do remotely first before you actually have to send someone out at site. But on the reboot side is sometimes we have scheduled reboots just to make sure things are kind of healthy, that the chargers are kind of online.
I don't want to drill this down too much, but yeah, I can't agree more. Like the turning it off and on again, it's the simplest thing ever. But just a power cycle or rebooting the sim session or just anything, just kind of like resetting the system in some way, whether it's remotely if possible or physically on site, as I mentioned, just flipping the breaker off and on. That at the very least gets a lot of things making that handshake again and allows you to do better remote diagnosis or remote triage, like investigate what went wrong. It'll usually kickstart the system to start working again.
Awesome. Thanks. Matt, anything that you wanted to add from your background?
I mean, maybe taking a slightly upstream perspective, like on the signal term that is used in the question. It's also I find building observability on your network, and being able to process, have the right tools to identify any deviations from something that's not normal, like can also help save resources. Like 'cause sometimes you just don't know that something going wrong and that there has been a change that's been made or many changes. And then if you have the right like KPIs and metrics, you can identify when there's been a deviation from the normal and try to pinpoint to what has been done on those chargers that has changed the performance.
Terrific. Thank you so much. 3 very, diverse views of what that looks like. I'll move on to the next question. As networks move beyond uptime, who is responsible for regularly documenting the condition of the physical site surrounding the charger? Not just the hardware performance, but lighting, signage, accessibility, emergency readiness, access, and overall site condition. This feels like somebody who wants this done.
I mean, I can speak about it in our case. In our case for BGC Hydro, we lease the land and we lease the space that we put our chargers in. So all those things are things that we have to do. So we have to fully document the space and check and make sure that's all there. In terms of the physical space, we have basically our site host relationship managers who kind of own that relationship. But that's not a third party for us. That's within our team.
And on my side of that, the documentation, it's a little different when you own the chargers or you provide the chargers and maintain them, but you don't own the building they're in or the land they're on, right? It's one of those things where a lot of the factors that you're asking about, they all kind of lead to the reliability of the overall site and the accessibility and everything like that. So if you as an operator are trying to take ownership of the activity of the chargers and how likely they are to be used and everything, you want to make sure that even if you can't necessarily control some of those things yourself, you're keeping an eye on like signage and lighting and access and everything to make sure that whoever the appropriate stakeholders are for those different features they're taking them seriously, because you don't want, like, if you are the owner of the charger, for example, but you don't own any of the building that's surrounding the charger, you want to kind of work with those stakeholders to make sure that none of those things are hampering the charger's usability, right? In my case, a lot of the stuff listed there is stuff that I specifically, anytime we did a service call or anytime we were on site for whatever reason, I would try and upkeep those records myself because of that very thing. Like if someone's complaining that something's wrong with the site, I want to know not just what's going on with the charger, but also what external factors there are around it. So it's definitely something that more people need to consider, though. Absolutely.
Great question. I'll go on to the next one. This one we hear a fair amount as well. So this question is, we often have multiple parties involved when something goes wrong. And you know, this panel was talking about this earlier. You know, it could be the network, the hardware vendor, the software vendor, provider, telecom. How do you avoid spending days trying to figure out or prove who actually owns the issue?
I mean, I can start because that's my day-to-day job here. I think we kind of mentioned that the key is the data, but then what do you do with the key is really like process it properly and try to identify, like, there's not only OCPP. At the end of the day, in the charging infrastructure, there are a bunch of, or there's not only one charger or multiple chargers, there's a bunch of IoT and other devices that we need to check, and having data really helps try to find out those issues. Because yeah, if you don't have data, then you go back to your suppliers, and then they might not have the data either. So maybe it goes back to a point that I don't remember, Alex, I think you were mentioning, is like try to find the appropriate suppliers that have all of those things, so you can build like your operations efficiently.
Yeah, what I would kind of add to that is it's, yeah, not only are you trying to kind of identify what the key kind of issues are, but actually, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. What was the question again? Sorry.
That it was the question around having multiple parties involved when
Oh,
something goes
right.
wrong. Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Sorry. The kind of, Matt, what you're kind of saying is like there will be times where you have to bring in everyone and try to figure it out. But having the data, having the history of what you've done before is pretty critical, that you can kind of like know, oh, in this case, this error, we think it's this. And you don't have to every time kind of call the whole council, the whole forum, and be like, hey, is it SIM card? Is this, like, you can kind of narrow it down. There will always be kind of some unique issues and cases where you will have to kind of do that investigative detective work, but ideally, as you kind of learn and grow, and each time you kind of document, oh yeah, this error code meant this part, and you know, we think it's this person, this is how you fix it. You can kind of like skip some of those steps and get down to the issue quicker.
Absolutely, and it's one of those things where you also kind of learn, even when you do have gaps in your visibility, you kind of learn what, like, how to fill in those gaps with the information that you do have. Kind of what you were saying there, Alice. You like a very common one, for example, is I mean, if everything goes off at the exact same time, if you lose visibility of all devices, then even though I don't have anything managing the power to the building or whatever, I'm assuming at that point it's very likely it's there's 2 points of critical failure. Either something happened to the SIM card and all the networking went down all at once, bringing the chargers offline, or something tripped and the power's down at the building. It's so just kind of a quick identifier, quickly sort of triaging based on what you don't know. Or like what you don't have visibility of is key, and that allows you to ask the right questions, even in situations where you don't have that sort of omniscient sort of view of everything. But just, yeah, using that relational data to figure out what's going on. Like, okay, so there's 3 chargers down. They all went down at the same time, but none of the other ones are down. Okay, what's the common element between those devices? Are they connected to the same access point, for example? The firmware update push and it didn't work or something like that. Again, like doing what you can rather than just like sort of shouting into the void, whatever your question is, hoping one of the many stakeholders will take ownership. Like just doing what you can to identify what those issues could potentially be, like very likely sort of causes based on what you know.
Terrific. Thanks, Aiden. And yeah, I think it goes to having the data and the proof behind it to support the conversation. So we'll wrap up with this last question. And I'm pretty confident I know Matt's answer, but what metric does your team rely on today?
Yeah, me, that's the charge success, or I should say first charge success, which is really making sure customer plugs in, everything works, so they can pay, they get to charge, but they also get to charge at the right power level. Alex was mentioning like power module failures, and they get the energy that they need as well.
That's exactly what I hoped you would say, Matt, and knew you would say. Aiden and Alex, is there one metric that you either use or you aspire to use? Uptime is what's been the metric for years, but we all have different views and opinions of that, of how helpful that is. Is there a metric that you use within your team?
Yeah, one thing, I mean, yeah, chart success is something we're gravitating towards. The other one I think is kind of related and it kind of like I think puts things in perspective is we do focus a lot on utilization percentage and kind of overall charger output. I think it's kind of critical also to understand, some of these issues, potentially if you're not kind of delivering, then customers won't come back to your site. And we want to always be delivering the best experience and hopefully kind of growing kind of that customer base. So if we do notice some dips and some changes in that kind of behavior, we understand there's some seasonality, but that's also a key metric that we look at us of like, hey, why is this site, not as maybe popular as it once was? And is there kind of some underlying issues, site issues, charger issues that are kind of driving that drop in usage? So yeah, I would say mainly chart success, but kind of utilization kind of ties in to it as well and kind of paints a kind of a bigger picture of the overall, in the end, kind of like the revenue piece and the kind of customer side of things.
That makes a ton of sense. And, brand confidence that charger is going to work helps support utilization. Anything to add, Aiden?
I mean, the metrics Matt and Alex mentioned are pretty much the key, right? Utilization percentages is the ultimate one that most people want, right? They want to see their chargers get used. But yeah, charge success. If those chargers can't be used, then utilization is going to be impacted. So from like an operator standpoint, looking at uptime is a very sort of broad, not exactly the most clean way to look at things. So yeah, charger success and utilization are definitely it. It's interesting in situations like my previous role where we were deploying chargers, like I said, in buildings we don't own, and we were just strictly managing the chargers and assisting with, or more or less monitoring and maintaining the chargers. We weren't even necessarily managing them directly, but what I did was I want to make sure that the clients that we had were happy with the installation. So taking on some level of ownership of sort of monitoring utilization and figuring out what factors can drive that, looking at utilization kind of as a benchmark for the site. If there's a couple similar sites geographically speaking, and one of them is seeing a much lower utilization than that sort of signals that there's something going on there. And going back to one of the previous questions, like, is it that the site can't be accessed? There's not enough signage. Like, do people even know the chargers are there? And yeah, I mean, there was actually a real life example where we had 4 chargers in a building, and none of the residents knew there was even chargers in the garage. So I think the property staff even was unaware because it was just put in by property management and unannounced or anything. So obviously those aren't going to be utilized. So those are just sort of echoing Matt and Alex primarily, but yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I think that's all the time we have for questions. I do want to say a huge thanks to our attendees, our guests that joined us, and for the questions that they've shared and engagement with that. A really, really big thank you to Alex and Aidan for joining us today and sharing your experiences and your insights. I know there'll be many, many more conversations to come. We really value your views and sharing your experiences. So with that, thank you, Matt, for hosting us. And I wish everybody a great rest of day. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.